Salix spinosa. So, Siriu is the daughter of a reader in Central Plains. Because of her soft, cute waist, someone half-jokingly called her Slim Willow. Since childhood, Siriu has been smart, good at reading and reading books. But she is quiet and never commenting on the good or the bad. She just comes to propose, and she must see it in person. I've seen a lot of suitors, and she's 19 years old. If you can't find a man you want, do you want to be a girl your whole life with a bun? Her parents told her angrily, I wanted to win by manpower, but after so long I didn't see the right man. And that's my fate, Hosoinagi said. From now on, it's entirely up to the parents. At the time, a student named Gao, a well-known figure from an official family, was engaged to Siriu after hearing about her reputation. After they got married, the couple became very close. Mr. Gao's ex-wife, who left behind a son, Chang Fu, a 5-year-old boy, was thoughtful. Sometimes when she goes home to her mother's house, Chang Fu always cries and screams to follow her. Just can't stop drinking. More than a year later, Siriu gave birth to a son named Chang Hu. When asked what the name meant, Ms. Gao replied, I don't mean anything else, but I hope he can grow up around me. Seleganella is very sparse about needle thread activity and often does not care. However, the amount of taxes payable on the location of the family field is checked according to the account book, but may not be detailed. After a long time, she said to her husband, please let go of the family business and leave it to me to see if I can be a good family. The high school students did what she said. After more than half a year, nothing in the family could not be done properly, and Gao admired her talent. One day, Mr. Gao went to a neighboring village for a drink, which coincided with a tax collection drive, knocking on the door and shouting. Siriu told his servants to go out and say good things, but he didn't leave. Siriu immediately sent the children's servant to bring her husband back. After the tax-collecting labor was gone, Mr. Gao laughed and said, you know now that even the brightest woman is not a foolish man, right? When Siriu heard about this job, she lowered her head and began to cry. Gao surprises her by holding up her hand to persuade her, and Siriu is never happy. Ms. Gao couldn't bear to let the chores ruin her, and still wanted to manage her own house. She got up early and went to bed late, and worked harder on her chores. Each time, a year in advance, you reserve the taxes you will pay next year. So you won't see a year's worth of bad labor to collect taxes before you come home. This is how she plans to eat and wear, making the family more generous. At one point, Ms. Gao joked with her, saying, what's the fine thing? The brow, the waist, the porridge, and the joy is more fine. After listening, Hosoinagi added to the list, saying, the goring is tall, ambitious, and written, but hopefully, the life count is high. One of the village's coffins was sold, and Mr. Sirius bought them at great cost. He could not scrape together the money and asked relatives and neighbors to borrow it. Gao Sheng thought this item was not urgent, so he repeatedly urged her not to buy it, and Siriu refused to listen. Coffins have been in the house for more than a year, and a wealthy family has died trying to buy them at double price. Gao negotiated with Siriu to sell the coffin for profit, but Siriu refused to let go, asking her why she didn't want to sell the coffin, and then asked her why her eyes were so bright that tears would fall. Gao Sheng was very strange, but he couldn't bear to go against her will again. So let's go. A year later, Gao was 25, and Siriu was adamant that he would not go out again. Sometimes he came home a little late, and the porters ran one after the other to call and invite. And so the people were happy with him. One day, Gao Sheng went to a friend's house for a drink, and suddenly felt unwell. So he rushed back, fell off his horse halfway down the road, and even died. It was a hot summer day, and luckily, the victim's clothes and quilts were all made by Narimura. The people in the village admire Miss Siriu's ability to foresee. It was only when Changfu was 10 that he began to study composition. When his father died, he was cosseted into being too lazy to read, often skipping school to play with his grazing children. First, Suriku scolded him and beat him with a lath, but Nagafuku was still foolish. If you don't want to study, why force you? Mr. Hosoinagi told him, It's just that poor families don't have a meal to feed the idol, so they can change into your clothes and work with the servants. Or I'll whip you. Don't regret it. So I dressed him up and told him to put the pig on. When he gets home, he gets a bowl and goes to dinner with the servants. After a few days, Chang Fu couldn't eat the bitterness and fell down on his knees in tears, saying he was willing to study again. Siryu went back to face and turned his back on the wall. Chang Fu had to leave the house crying with a whip. The autumn is coming, and Naga Fuku is bare-knuckled, naked, with no shoes on. The rain was cold and wet, and he looked like a flower to eat. The villagers have seen him, and those who continue to marry are wary of Miss Siryu, and many have complained and talked about her. Siryu has heard about this, but he is indifferent to it and doesn't care. Chang Fu couldn't stand the crime, so he left the pig and fled. Siryu didn't ask. It took months for Chang Fu to return home gaunt without a plea for food. But he did not dare rush in and begged his neighbor's old wife to tell his mother, "If he can stand 100 sticks, he can come and see me, otherwise he will leave early," Ho Soyagi said. Chang Fu heard the words and burst into the door, crying bitterly and willing to be beaten with a stick. "Did you know to repent today?" Mr. Hosoinagi asked. Chang Fu said, "I regret it. Since you know that you are repentant, you don't have to fight. You can be honest and truthful about the pig. You will not be spared if you commit another crime," Hosoinagi said. Chang Fu cried and said, "I will be beaten with 100 sticks. Please ask my mother to send me to study again." Miss Hosoyagi refused to listen, and the old lady of the neighbor counseled. He washed his head and changed his clothes, so that he could study with his brother Chang Ho. Chang Fu has worked hard since then, which is very different from the previous one, and he got the talent test in 3 years. Young Gong, an inspector, met with Chang Fu. The article is very important to him. Let the government provide him with food every month to support his study. Miss Chang was so obtuse she couldn't write her name after years of reading. My mother had to tell him to quit school, go farming. Long-haired wanderers are tired of hard work. Her mother raged, "If you can't study or grow land, why don't you just starve to fill the gully?" He said he beat him with a stick. From then on, Chang Ho led the servants to plant the land, and when the morning was late, his mother scolded him. "My mother always blessed my brother with good clothes and food." Miss Chang is afraid to say this, but she is at odds with herself. When the farm was finished, his mother paid him to study business. Chang Hao is a gambler, and all the money he has is gone. However, he falsely claims that he is unlucky to meet a thief, so as to cheat his mother. Mother almost beat him to death with a stick when she realized it. My mother's wrath subsided when Eternal Fortune kneeled on the ground and begged to be beaten in place of his brother. From now on, as soon as Nagaho left the house, his mother secretly visited him. So Mr. Nagaho's bad deeds have subsided slightly, but he is not serious about doing so. One day, Chang Hao went to ask his mother to follow a few businessmen to Luoyang. In fact, to lend himself a chance to go far away and do whatever he pleases. Yet he was nervous, lest his mother refuse. After listening to him, my mother, without any doubt, immediately took out 32 or 30 cents and prepared him and finally brought a silver ingot to him, saying, "This is the remnant from your grandfather's money bag when he was an official. It can't be spent, but can only be pressed for emergency use. Besides, you're going away for the first time to study business, and you're not expected to make a lot of money, as long as you can't lose your money." My mother told him again and again when I left. Miss Chang promised to leave the house, thankful that her plan had been carried out. In Luoyang, Miss Chang stopped spending time with businessmen and lived alone at the home of Li Ji, a famous prostitute. After staying for more than a dozen nights, the 32 or 30 coins were all spent. He thought he had the silver ingot in his purse, and didn't think he would be short of money at first. But he took out the silver ingot and chopped it down to find out it was fake. He was so scared. His face changed color. Ms. Li gave him a cold shoulder when she saw him like this. Miss Chang is restless, but her money bag is empty and she has nowhere to run. She still hopes that Ms. Li will see the feelings of those days and not immediately kick him out. Moments later, two men came in with a rope in their hands and suddenly held his neck. Wang Zha was terrified and didn't know what to do. He asked what happened, but Li Ji had already stolen the fake silver and went to the court. He was taken to see officials, unable to defend himself, and was tortured and nearly killed. In prison, penniless and ill-treated by the wardens, he was unable to ask fellow prisoners for food, and he survived. At first, as soon as Chang Hao was on her way, her mother said to Chang Fu, "Remember to wait 20 days for you to go to Luoyang. I have so many things I'm afraid I've forgotten about." Nagafuku asked why, but his mother was so sad that she burst into tears. He didn't dare ask again, so he backed out. 20 days later, Chang Fu asked his mother again. She sighs, "Your brother is just as flirty and loose as you were when you skipped school. If I hadn't risked my bad reputation for abusing you, where would you be today? People say I'm heartbroken, but when I'm in a pillow, people don't know." She cried as she spoke. Mr. Nagafuku stood respectfully next to me and listened, afraid to ask again. The mother wept and said, "Because your brother's unruly heart won't die. I deliberately gave him the fake silver to make him suffer, and I reckon he's in jail by now. You begged Lord Yang, so that you can both relieve the death of the elder and make him feel ashamed and truly repentant." Chang Fu was on his way immediately. By the time he entered Luoyang, his brother had been arrested for 3 days. He went on to visit his brother in prison, and saw that Chang Ho's face had become like a ghost. Long Hao cried when he saw his brother and couldn't look up. Chang Fu also cried with him. Chang Fu was popular with Lord Yang, so everyone near and far knew his name. When the sheriff found out he was Chang Ho's brother, he released him. Miss Chang returned home, afraid that her mother, angry at herself, would kneel before her. My mother looked at him and said, "Did you get what you wanted this time?" With tears streaming down her face, Chang Fu kneeled down with her, and her mother stood still. From then on, Chang Ho decided to make a clean break for all the family's affairs, and he was very diligent in handling them. Even if he was casually lazy, his mother wouldn't ask him. After a few months, his mother stopped talking about letting him go into business. And he tried to ask, but didn't dare, so he told his brother what he meant. When I heard about it, my mother was happy and tried to borrow a large sum of money to give Chang Hu. In just 6 months, he's making double the interest. That fall, Chang Fu took the test and 3 more years later, and his brother, Chang Hao, has amassed thousands of silver. A guest in Sichuan County, Luoyang, said he had secretly met the wife, Silu. Though in her 40s, she is still in her 30s, and she wears plain clothes, just like any other person.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.